Okay.
You are in for a treat. Our guest speaker is a speaker, performer, director, and producer. And as fate would have it, she looks like Rita Hayworth. She is the star of the hit shows Burlesque to Broadway and Rita Hayworth, The Heat Is On. The New York Times described her performances as dazzling, with one show-stopping number after another. The New York Times says you don't ever have to squint your eyes to see Rita's in the room. You might have seen her on Good Morning America, Oprah, or as a finalist on Shark Tank. She is the host of the TV show Secrets of the Stage. We have invited Quinn to tell us about how she created her critically acclaimed shows, Rita Hayworth, The Heat Is On, and Burlesque to Broadway. So get your jazz hands ready, because after you applaud profusely, we will see the first video. So to discuss The Heat Is On, Burlesque to Broadway, with pride, I introduce another member of the National Speakers Association, Quinn Lemley. Applaud away.
Was a shooting up in the Klondike when they got Dan the folks were putting the blame on the lady known as Lou. I get too hungry for dinner at 8. I like the theater but never go late. Amado mio, love me forever and let forever begin tonight. Put the blame on me.
Good morning, Golden Gate Breakfast Club, San Francisco. Good morning. I'm here live from New York City, and it is so great to be here with you today. Thank you so much. And Patricia, that introduction was fabulous. Thank you. I enjoyed visiting your club several weeks ago and hearing Kim Kelly's speech as a cult survivor advocate and exposing child trafficking, because ironically, it relates a little bit to Rita Hayworth's story. There are several themes today in your questions and so on that I'm going to come back to, because it really does relate to Rita's story and my story, and I'm sure so many of our stories. And today I'm going to speak about my shows, Rita Hayworth, The Heat Is On, A Life in Concert, and Burlesque to Broadway. And the theme with me that resonated the most in Rita's journey and the women in Burlesque to Broadway, they were women who broke glass ceilings that went from Burlesque to Broadway and beyond. And my own personal journey is the theme of resilience. And what you can look forward to hearing today are 3 movements to move forward with resilience. Act 1 is the art of the pivot. Act 2 is the magic of collaboration. And 3, the final act, is the courage of showing up. The next time you have a challenge in your life, no matter what the circumstance it is, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to use one of these 3 concepts to move forward in your life. So what is Rita Hayworth, A Life in Concert, The Heat Is On? Patricia so beautifully set this up, but I'll just tell you a little bit about it. Yes, we have been on Oprah and Geraldo and Good Morning America and Shark Tank. But Rita Hayworth, The Heat Is On, is a one-woman show about the life and career of the hottest movie star in the 1940s. We've had tremendous success with the show. And it's ironically like our theme today, my success has been in 3 acts. And as I've said, we've appeared, we've made the front page of the New York Post, been critically acclaimed. And last year we won the Bistro Award and we got a MAC nomination. And yes, it's so exciting. And I am really, really pleased to say that we've been critically acclaimed and we've been selling out in New York City. And my residency in New York, I have one more. Betty, you can come on November 20th at 7:00 at Don't Tell Mamas for my New Yorkers out there. Our residency has grown from 4 shows to 10 shows. Now we're doing 18 months of a residency coming out of COVID, which is huge because shows like this, they usually are very finite. And then we're going to go out on the road this weekend. We start back in theaters after COVID. Thank God. In North Carolina, we go to Tryon Fine Arts Center, and then we go across the pond. Derek, I hope that you'll come. We're coming to London in February. She is the love goddess, so we will be there the weekend of Valentine's Day. So tell your friends and your friends too. And then we're doing a whole week on the Jersey Shore, and we're going to be going into a lot of theaters. So I'm really, really excited. And I hope that I'll see you there wherever we are in the world, because Rita's story is amazing. It's a story with a lot of trials and tribulations. But when you, I'm sure you're going to relate to it because her ascent to stardom was so huge, but you can't be that big without a lot of trials and tribulations. So I want to share with you some of her journey and my journey. And I think that you're going to be able to relate to that. I know you are all of a certain age. How many of you know who Rita Hayworth was? Good. Well, Rita Hayworth was, for those of you that don't, and when I'm dealing with younger audiences, Rita Hayworth was the Lady Gaga, the J-Lo, the Beyonce of 1946. She was the personification of World War II. She was the pinup. She was married to some of the most powerful men in the 1940s, Orson Welles, Prince Ali Khan. She dated and was pregnant with Howard Hughes. She was the star that built Columbia Pictures. So when you see a Columbia picture, you see the icon with the goddess. That's a personification of Rita Hayworth, even today when you see the Columbia logo. So for those of you, like I said, for those of you that do know her, you know that she is electrifying on the screen, and you just can't take her eyes off of her. And even though in our show, we're dealing with some really difficult subjects, incest, sexual abuse, what it took to become a star in the 1940s, and probably what it takes to be a star today. War, the big one, WW2. Failed marriages, motherhood, alcohol addiction, and ultimately Alzheimer's. So these are some really deep themes that we're dealing in our show, and yet the show is very positive and uplifting. Rita Hayworth dances into our hearts when you see her films. You really, she's effervescent, and you can't get her out of your mind. And in The Heat Is On, we celebrate her strengths, her beauty, her talent, and her resilience through the grace and humor that makes the audience lean forward and champion her as a heroine. We all want to be that heroine. You know, we identify with the hero or the heroine. And so why Rita Hayworth for me? Well, we're both redheads now. And actresses, and we're ambitious and we're determined. Unlike Rita, I'm a singer. She was mainly a dancer. And Rita's from Brooklyn, and I'm just a little girl from Indiana. But basically, the bottom line is with my granny, Lemley, who I'm going to talk about later, I just cannot believe the themes that you guys are talking about today, because it goes into my talk. Thank you very much. I think Patricia planned it. in my 20s, I was doing a show off Broadway called Bon Turumba, which is a show about Havana, Cuba. And it's about this Cuban woman who was a showgirl, and she comes to New York to escape Castro, and she becomes a nun. And one of the reviewers of Broadway World saw me, and he's like, "Darling, you look like Rita Hayworth." And with my granny Lemley, who lived behind me, every day I'd go to her house and we'd watch all the old movies, and we would share biographies, and we would act like, remember Luke and Laura in General Hospital? Well, we'd act like we knew who these movie stars were, and we would talk and gossip about them, and it was fabulous. And she introduced me with the 8 tracks to all the music and the movies, and it was just really, really marvelous. But ironically, the one star I didn't know was Rita Hayworth. I don't know why. And so he said, "Darling, you have to meet Carter Inskeep. He wrote Always Patsy Cline." Do you guys remember Always Patsy Cline? It was a show that moved all over Broadway or off Broadway in the 1980s. And you need to write the story of Rita Hayworth. Now, remember, I was in my 20s, and this story does have 3 acts, like my points that I'm going to make today. Now, but my connection, so you have to understand that I was in my 20s, not to give away my age, but there was no internet, right? There was no internet. I had just graduated NYU, and we had to read every biography on Rita Hayworth. I watched actual DVDs and VHSs of every one of her movies, probably 100 times. And then we had to go to the library, to the New York Public Library, and go into microfiches and look on those tapes to find all the interviews. And we were really looking, my personal interest was, my question, and writing this with Carter, was, who was Rita Hayworth? Who was Rita Hayworth? She was controlled by the studio. So yes, we fall in love with her celluloid image, her glamour, her beauty. She's a femme fatale. But more interesting was, who is Margarita Cancino? And how is Margarita Cancino, that young girl who never had a chance to develop into a woman? Who was she? What were her hopes and dreams? What did she want out of life? And how is she any different from you or me in what we want in life? And the most famous quote from Rita Hayworth in her life was, I think in a nutshell, the problem was they went to bed with Gilda, but woke up with me. Have you ever been in a relationship or had people see you, especially for those of you that are speakers or public people, where people see you as the external, but not who the person is on the inside? And we all have pain bodies, and we have hopes and dreams and everything. And unfortunately, all Rita Hayworth wanted to do was to love and be loved. And in spite of her tremendous success, that eluded her. And I could totally relate to this, because in spite of her beauty and talent, she lived a life trying to be what everybody else wanted her to be, what they projected on her. She was like, a lot of her biographers say she was like a blank slate. And I could totally relate to that, because, and I'm saying this with love, my mother is fabulous, but she's very controlling. And I spent my whole life trying to please her and be the person that she wanted me. I studied opera because she wanted me to be an opera singer. And I always felt like I was never talented enough or pretty enough or, believe it or not, thin enough. I didn't know that people manipulated the magazines. I wanted to be like those women, and I tried to do it, and so I could totally relate to her. And for Rita, imagine starting your career dancing at 4 years old for your father professionally, becoming the family's breadwinner during the Depression and Prohibition. So there were no nightclubs left in the States. And so by the time she was 14, she was working in Tijuana, Mexico, and she was working on these gambling ships with her father and pretending to be his wife. And then he started doing that in public and then privately as well. And he would keep her locked in a dressing room. And so she said, look, I'm not going to draw you a picture. I learned a lot from him, but a lot more in spite of him, like the power of a dream. And so I just want to remind you of probably the greatest theme from her film CoverGirl, that was like a hope for World War II, for the veterans in World War II. And she sang it with Gene Kelly. Long ago and far away, I dreamed a dream one day, and now that dream is here beside me. Long the skies were overcast, but now the clouds have passed. You're here at last. So that takes us into our first point, Act 1, the art of the pivot. Think of a time in your life when you had to pivot, good or bad. It could be the loss or the beginning of a relationship. It could be a job. It could be an opportunity. It could be you all of a sudden find out you're going to have a family, and that's a huge pivot, or you're going to move, or you're going to change jobs. What's a pivot? For me, a pivot is you're going down in one direction, going down a line in one direction with dreams and goals and plans, and then all of a sudden something explosive happens. And you absolutely have to change directions. And sometimes that can be paralyzing. We don't want to pivot, but we have to pivot. And so you have to shift gears to survive. And I'm just thinking of the time when Rita Hayworth finally got the role that catapulted her into international stardom, Gilda. At the same time, she became the biggest star in the world and the biggest femme fatale. She also fell in love with Orson Welles and had her first daughter, Rebecca. And Orson Welles was, strangely, the love of her life. He was an egomaniac. He had to be the maestro. This man had no intention of playing second fiddle, and he had no intention of being Mr. Rita Hayworth. And so the minute their daughter, Rebecca, was born, he started to disappear. And then when Gilda came along, he just vanished off the scene and left her in 1946 as the hottest star in the world and a single mom. I mean, and he was, and took all of her money. I mean, all of her husbands took her money. And so here she is in a mob scene, in the hottest star in the world, and completely lost. And for me, that was in September 28th, 2003, I was asking the universe for a manager to take me out of small clubs and theaters into major halls, casinos, and performing arts centers. And Paul Horton, the president of Century Artist Management Agency, answered my call. By the way, I also asked the universe, he or she, whoever they are, I said, also, by the way, do you think I could maybe have a soulmate too, if that's not too much to ask? And the minute that we met in that meeting, I knew that both of us knew that our lives were never going to be the same. And Paul was, he was funny. I thought when on the phone, he was like in his late 60s because he had this very distinct speaking voice. But when I met him, he was actually 3 years younger than I am. So, good for, cougars, right? So anyway, but he was very wise. He came from kind of show business royalty. His uncle was the CEO of Columbia Artists Management Agency, and he managed the likes of Chuck Berry, B.B. King, the OJs. And here I am, this little girl from Indiana singing jazz, but he changed my life. And together we rebranded in my 30s the Rita Hayworth Show, and with a big band. And he was like, "Why are you doing the music from her film? She didn't sing, she was dubbed. Use the Great American Songbook with a big band, and that's the fabric of their life." And then also we produced Burlesque to Broadway, which celebrated the women that went from burlesque to Broadway and beyond, and shape-shifted culture as we know it. And then he pushed me into becoming a director, and he's like, "You can direct and create this show on David Bowie." I'm like, who am I? But he just pushed me in there, and I created Rebel, Rebel, The Many Lives of David Bowie. I directed and co-produced with him The Ultimate Queen Celebration, starring Mark Martel and now Yvonne Pedneau. And he was the voice in when Rami Malek didn't sing in the Oscar-winning show Bohemian Rhapsody that won the Oscar. That was because of our show and our creation. And then also Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. As you can see, Derek, I love British artists. So we were rocking it. Now, but I have to, my pivot was in March 2023, March 3rd and 4th. This year, Paul unexpectedly was taken to the hospital, and he had COVID with major complications, and he passed away. And he was 53. And he was my everything. He was my rock, my best friend, my lover, my partner. We did everything together, my agent, my manager. And what do? I lost everything. How was I going to navigate through the world? Who am I in the world without Paul? And not only that, I was the creative person in it, and he was the financial and the mind and the contracts and all of that. I mean, that's not my wheelhouse. So what do? The art of the pivot. You're, like I said, you're going in one direction, and then something all of a sudden big happens, and you have to turn into another direction. And you know that, remember that Christmas song, you know, he's like a little elf, and he's a dentist, and they say you just have to put one foot in front of the other. Anyway, so I was like the abominable snowman. And for Rita, after Orson Welles, Rita left for Europe to find a new life. She had to have an abortion with Howard Hughes's child, and then she wound up in Cannes, which I came back from yesterday and found Prince Ali Khan. Oh, Patricia, I went to their house. I saw it, the Chateau de la Horizon. It was so much fun. So anyway, I'm still trying to collect all of the pieces of my story. So flexibility is a key to pivot. And, you know, at this point, I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I'm sure you guys have been in that situation before. So these are the techniques that help me personally pivot, and I hope that they can help you. The first one is every day I sit in gratitude. I set my day up with gratitude. And I think, my God, some people, I had a privilege of having 20 years with Paul, creating and living the life that I wanted to do and live as an artist. And then all of the people around me, my God, I mean, I am surrounded by some of the most incredible people. And I just sit there in gratitude and try to go in that direction as opposed to the victim mentality. The second thing I did was especially when he died, and sometimes, you know, like when life comes at you and you don't, like, the only thing I knew how to do that weekend was make an omelet. Thank God I knew Julia Child, and she taught me how to make a great omelet, but that's all I knew how to do. So I found that the best thing to do is when you're frozen and you have to pivot, is to change your physical state, to get your body moving and get out of wherever you are, you know, even if it's hopping up and down or working out or taking a walk, just changing the physical state. And so the other thing was, I really made an intentional shift to watch my thoughts and my language, because our language and our thoughts shape our destiny, because they shape the choices that we make and how we present ourselves in the world. So I'm still working on this, you guys. I'm not perfect, but I'm taking can't, no, but I'm not out of my vocabulary and out of my thoughts. And the other big piece, and I wouldn't be here today with you if I didn't do this. I have said yes to things and taken action, massive action, even when I was most uncomfortable. With Paul, I was always wanting to be perfect and safe. I have said yes to every speaking opportunity, every singing opportunity. I wanted to join NSA. I wanted to go to Influence. I wouldn't have met Ron Carr. I wouldn't have met Patricia if I didn't say yes. And it wasn't even about the money. I mean, it was a lot of money. But I was like, I have to do it. I have to change the people that I know. I have to say yes. I have to grow, because if we're not growing, we're dying. Right. And so that was like the biggest. I was so uncomfortable walking into Influence, and I barely knew people, but thank God I knew a few people from New York, and they took me under their wing, and here I am today. So thank you, Ron. Thank you, Patricia. And so there's a song that Rita, whenever when she had to pick herself up and go back to Hollywood after her divorce from Ali Khan, you've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've got to spread joy up to the maximum, bring gloom down to the minimum, have faith or pandemonium's liable to walk upon the scene. So music, singing these songs have really helped me channel my energy and really connect to the audience, because these are universal feelings. Act 2, the magic of collaboration. Have you heard that 1 + 1 = 3? Yes, I heard that from Ron. We had a great discussion about this, but it's an old saying that when we collaborate, we each individually have an idea or a thought, but when you come together and you share in something, then that births a third thought. So you don't just get 2, you get 3. So it's a both and nobody can be successful in a vacuum. Life is about finding the right people, talent, and trusting them to share and shape your vision, but you can't do it alone. In my business, in producing and directing, it's about finding the right team. Like even Martin Scorsese, or the greatest directors, they say that creating a film, it's all about the casting. It's all about collaborating and finding the right people and putting the right people together to create your vision. Think about your most successful moments in life. Who are the people that were cheering you on and influencing you in your journey? Were they your spouse, your colleagues, your boss, your children, your friends? I mean, we all play different roles for different people. Gilda was the sexiest, most provocative film noir in 1946. And what seems to be an iconic moment is when she sings "Put the Blame on Mame," and she just takes off that one black glove as a tease in that strapless Jean-Louis gown. And it's directed by Charles Vidor. And the music, "Put the Blame on Mame, boys, put the blame on Mame." Doris Fisher and Alan Fields. And think of all the people that it takes to create that one magic moment, the writers, the composers, the crew. And when you look at it, it's just Rita Hayworth on the screen, but all the people surrounding it. And for us, it is the same in our projects, from the director, the musical director, the promoter, the musicians, and most importantly, it's the audience. The audience never lies. For us, how do we work together to move the audience? How do we get the audience to lean in? Our success is never a result of ourselves. We have to listen and watch what moves the audience and be able to pivot, just like we were talking earlier. All of these things are interrelated. It takes a village. Everyone is important and must be treated as such. In my business, you see some really ugly behavior, and especially as egos get high. I'm sure it's in every industry. But as Shakespeare says, there are no small parts, just small players. Here's a short example of collaboration. Without it, there would be no Rita Hayworth, The Heat Is On, which you saw the video. You saw what Paul and I put together, and that was at BB King's, and Patricia played that clip. Now, Act 3 is the final act. And this has been my hardest thing. It's like me even showing up today here. I mean, I got home at 2 a.m. your time, and I worked with Patricia last night, and she so graciously worked with me. The courage of showing up, even if it's uncomfortable. I want to tell you this story about Burlesque to Broadway. As I said, we were talking about our grannies, and I was like, oh my God, I have my Granny Lemley and my Granny Z and my Bouchot Caper, and all the three of them I put together as my as my ally in Burlesque to Broadway. But I started, as I said, every day after school, I'd run over to Granny Lemley's house, and she lived behind us in Indiana. And I was reading about all of those great women who started either in burlesque or vaudeville and went to Broadway and moved on. And these women broke glass ceilings, and they invented themselves in a time where, women in the 1920s and 30s weren't in the marketplace, and if you were considered not really a legitimate person, right? But these women invented themselves and shape-shifted culture as we know it today. And I'm going to give you some examples so that you can go, oh, when you see a contemporary person, you're going to say, oh, I can see the legacy there. I admired, identified, and I wanted to be like these women. Sally Rand, do you know Sally Rand with the Fans? She was an out-of-work chorus girl who could not get work in Hollywood. So she showed up at the Chicago's World Fair with on a horse's Lady Godiva, naked with a braid strategically placed. And then she created the fan dance that is so iconic in show business today. And she performed naked with her fans, was the highest paid vaudeville performer until her 80s. And so she said, darling, you just have to take care of the goods. Mae West. I want to be like these women, right? Mae West wrote, produced, and directed on Broadway. She was put in jail for her play Sex. And she didn't even go to Hollywood to become a star until she was like 38 or 39, until her late 30s, and made it in her 40s. And Mae West owned most of Hollywood. She became the biggest real estate mogul in Hollywood. Talk about power, right? Think about Cher, right? In the 1970s, Granny Lemley and I would watch the Sonny and Cher show, and Carol Burnett. She started using vaudeville and burlesque and pop tunes, new songs on the Sonny and Cher show, doing retro skits with a contemporary twist. And she was the one who introduced new artists, new songs, Elton John, Anne Margaret, Tina Turner. I mean, think about how these people influenced the world, but she was using the fabric of these older generations, because everything old is new again. So we created Burlesque to Broadway, Paul and I, in the height of the big recession. And we used the way we financed it, and never do this because I've learned never use your own money, use other people's money. But we were young and we were naive. So we had like 10 shows on the books. And so we took the deposits, because you get 50%, and we used that money to create the show. And I'll do a workshop for you guys how to create a show one time if you're interested. And we stupidly, because I didn't believe in myself enough as a writer, gave the director at the time, his friend who was a comedian, the writing control. And he hired him to write my show. And at that time, the show was called Gotta Get a Gimmick. Like in Gypsy, you gotta get a gimmick if you want to get a chance. So this guy hijacked our show. He made the vehicle for himself. It wasn't my story. He made me look bad. He missed all of our deadlines and totally tried to steal the show. And everything that could have been, have you ever had everything that could possibly go wrong. Well, it did. I had everybody in show business at BB King, 600 people, and even my costume fell off, and it wasn't supposed to be a striptease because it was being handled together. And I was so embarrassed. It was the worst. It was the most, I thought I was never going to be able to show my face in New York again. And we lost all of our investment. We were obligated to start over and perform the show in 2 months for 10 shows. And we were Borsak. And the audience, though, loved me and they believed in my Rita Hayworth show, but they hated this writer guy and the MC. And we had no money, but we had to fulfill these contracts and fly a company of 7 people and house them and feed them for a week. So what were we going to do? My mother says, always keep swimming down the river. First step, pray, and the universe does provide when we take action. And out of the blue came this Tony and award-winning director, Joe Hardy. He was this 80-year-old Groosh that worked with Liz Taylor and all these people. And he came in and into our lives and helped us out of this fiasco. And he said, Quinny, it's your story. You have to write it. And this show was scary for me. I was able to identify with Rita Hayworth because I was playing another character. It was her story, but this show was about me and my relationship with these ladies and who I wanted to become. And with my Granny Lemley, who I kind of in this show put together, my Busha and my Granny Z and my Granny Lemley. My Busha was a bootlegger and she came from Poland and helped people from World War II start their lives. And I mean, these women, I just put them all in one character and the audience loved them, but I didn't know what I was doing. And every fear I had showed up. Was it my authentic self? What if they didn't like the show, or worse, what if they didn't like me?
Live, celebrating life with nothing too high. Oh, tonight we are going to celebrate the icons that went all the way from Burlesque, Broadway, and beyond. Are you ready to have a good time? I can feel it, but let me hear it. Are you ready? Tell your friends and their friends too. Come watch us do our dance for you. Here we go. Though we're in those gray clouds, someday you'll see that terrific rainbow.
Tracy, those who are easily shocked should be shocked more often.
From the apple, from the orange, and from the coffee.
The Austin Towers and the best box, you know.
Let yourself go, relax. You got yourself tied up in the dark. The night is cold, but the music's hot. So, well, she knows what you're about. She can take what you can show. That's not easy.
Thank you so much. So that was what we had created up until that point. So, but of course, we always want more, right? So we wanted to expand the show, add more girls, add Johnny Lee Hooker's Boom, 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 and have a mega mix finale. We wanted to go to the conferences, create merch and record a CD, but we needed an investor. And we loved the TV show Shark Tank. Do you guys know Shark Tank? Okay. So one day we were at a small business expo and the producers of Shark Tank were there. And every day we visualized what we wanted. And so there were lines of entrepreneurs, but we pitched, and the next week we got a call back and we were contestants for season 5 of Shark Tank. And for 6 weeks, we worked with the producers on the historicals, the financials, everything for our bit for the Sharks. Hello, Sharks. And we were standing by to go to LA, and I had a Toastmaster meeting, and I invited a fellow Toastmaster over to look at my numbers because she was a statistist. I can never say this word, statistician. And so I showed her our pitch and everything and showed her the financials. And she said, if the Sharks don't bite, I'd like to invest in your show. And the next day, the producers called and said the Sharks want us to come back next year, and because they didn't want to invest in the space of entertainment. So out of I mean, it was perfect because she was everything we weren't. She was mathematical, she was practical, she was dry, she was detail oriented, where we're sequins, feathers, and fans. And so Lois was the perfect investor, and we didn't have to give up our entire show because the sharks usually take 60 or 80%. So this is what we created. So we showed up, we were pivoted, and we found collaboration, and we were flexible. Because you know what? You never know who's sitting next to you or who's across from you. Patricia, show the little clip, just show 30 seconds of it from This Is What We Created with Lois, my Toastmaster shark, or sharkette, I would like to think. But we changed her life and she changed ours. She even started wearing feathers. Thank you. So Rita Hayworth, coming back to Rita, her final reel is pretty bleak. And she unfortunately never found the love that she longed for. For all of us, it was important for us in our company, it was important for us to show her strength and her resilience and the beauty and talent that she brought into the world. And she lit up a screen and with her movement and her energy. And that's what we wanted to celebrate in our show. And although she didn't find the love that she longed for, she showed up. She survived child and sexual abuse from her father. She survived being pimped out by her first husband, manager Ed Judson. She married some of the most dynamic men of the 1940s, Orson Welles, Prince Ali Khan, Dick Haymes, and James Hill. She danced into the hearts with classic films like You Were Never Lovely or CoverGirl, Pal Joey. She starred with Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, Glenn Ford, Frank Sinatra. She was the first American, even before Grace Kelly, to become a princess. She defied Harry Cohn, the infamous Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, and she built Columbia Pictures. She was the pinup on the last atomic bomb ever dropped. She was a mother. She loved and cared for her daughters as a single parent. And she was one of the first actresses in the 50s to have her own production company. And in 1956, she produced Separate Tables, which won an Oscar for David Niven. Unfortunately, at 48, after her divorce from Ali Khan, she started showing irrational behavior. Everybody at the time thought it was the booze, but she continued to show up, even though her mind and her body were eluding her. And she fought for equal inheritance. This was back in the early 50s for her daughter Yasmin. And she continued to show up and do what she needed to do to get by: personal appearances, a couple of foreign films, a little television. But back then, now you hear about this all the time, but back then, nobody had a word: Alzheimer's. Resilience. If Rita Hayworth, Mae West, Sally Rand, Cher can be resilient, so can I, a little girl from Indiana who came to New York to follow my dreams and make a difference in spite of loss, failure, and now after Paul's passing, in the process of reinventing myself. And I've learned that the most important aspects of resilience are vital to moving forward. And that is Act 1, the art of the pivot. Act 2, the magic of collaboration. Act 3, the final act, the courage of showing up, even if you're afraid. Whether it's good or challenging, the next time that you have to be resilient, what steps are you going to take? How can you apply it in your life? And we only have one life. Only you can do what you do and do it as you. So why not live fully, take a chance, and like the great, great poet Mel Brooks said, when you got it, flaunt it, step right up and strut your stuff. People say that modesty's a virtue, but in the theater, modesty will hurt you. When you got it, flaunt it, show your assets, let them know you're proud. Your goodies you must push, Stick your chest out, shake your tush. When you got it, shout it out loud. Thank you so much. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I'd love to hear from you.